My name is Sandra Goldmark, and I am going to darn a sock with you today. This is an old pair of my wool socks. Actually, they're not that old, but they're very dear to me. As you can see, they have been darned before, or maybe you can't see it, but there was a hole in the heel, and I did darn it. I did not, however, darn these worn spots in the toe, and you can see that because I didn't do that preventative darning, a new hole has formed. So I'm just going to darn this hole and show you how I do it. So the tools that I have for darning are, of course, my sock with my hole in it. I have a darning egg. You don't actually need one. You can put your hand inside the sock just like I did. You need a needle, a darning needle, or at least a needle with a fairly large eye hole. I'll show you that. This one's pretty big. And you need some thread or cord or wool yarn. You can buy these in craft stores. You can unravel an old sweater that's wearing out. I've collected these bits and bobs over the years. I'm going to choose my color, 2 gray, 2 blue, and I happen to have a nice, pretty close, nice matching blue-gray. So you're going to thread your needle. All right. Now for darning, darning socks, I do not put a knot in the end of the thread the way you might if you were stitching clothing, because it's uncomfortable under your heel or the ball of your foot to have a knot in the material. I'm going to put my egg in. The egg just helps you see the hole and not sew the 2 parts of the sock together. And essentially what you're doing when you darn is you're re-weaving the fabric. So this, or re-knitting, this fabric is a series of knitted loops. I'm going to pick a direction to start. I'm going to start actually on the back side of the fabric. Just bring my thread in. And I'm actually going to kind of go over, under, not even near the hole. Just for a minute to get myself into the fabric, into the fabric, into the sock. Since I didn't put that any knot in there, I want to make sure that my yarn, my darning yarn, doesn't ever pull out. So I'm going in one direction now. I'm going to do a series of stitches, under, over, under, over, under, over. And I'm going to do this several times until I've covered the hole and extended out beyond the hole a fair bit in either direction. I'm extending beyond the hole, first of all, because I don't want the edges of the existing hole to just rip out further, and because my sock is getting quite worn and I'm going to get new holes, I can tell. So I'm kind of darning my hole and reinforcing the surrounding areas so I don't get new holes all at the same time. I'm going pretty fast here, making big loose over under stitches, which is fine. It's a wool sock, nice big material, and it's on my foot, so I'm not looking for extremely beautiful repair here. If you were darning a hole on something, a finer fabric, you would not use yarn, you would use a finer thread or cord, and you would probably make much smaller stitches. You can see I've almost filled in that hole in one direction, and you can also see I'm not pulling very tight. My goal is not to kind of cinch up the hole, it's to fill it, to essentially fill in those missing threads or bits of yarn where they've literally become worn away. If I cinched it up, I would have another uncomfortable little spot on the bottom of my foot. All right, So now I have gone all the way across the hole in one direction. I might here kind of change my thread if I needed to, but since I know I'm not going to do a knot, I think I'm just going to go for it with the thread I have and see if I can kind of, see if I can get it done with this amount of thread. So now I'm going to go across in the opposite direction, and I'm going to go over, under, and when I get to the new bits of yarn that I installed, I'm going to slow down a little bit and try to really catch every other one so that I'm actually going over, under, across those new bits of yarn that I put in there. Ooh, it's a little gnarly here at the edge. Ah, here I am. Let's see, can I go over? Now here, if I can see properly, I want to do the opposite of what I just did. So if I went over one the last time around, I want to go under it this time. It's very hard to see. And again, if I was doing a super careful job, I would kind of do it right. I would make sure that I was going opposite. But again, under the foot doesn't need to be the most perfectly beautiful thing. Okay, so now I've gone back and forth a few times in the, let's say, horizontal direction, the other direction from the one I started. And it's looking pretty good. You can no longer see the hole. We have a nice color. Some people darn in like a contrasting color, which is quite nice. Then I would have to do a slightly more careful job. So I actually love darning in the same color. It gives me great satisfaction to have an invisible mend. When people darn or do decorative embroidery in contrasting colors, they sometimes call it visible mending, which is also quite beautiful. But I happen to be a fan of the invisible mend. Okay, so now again, as I said, oops, I lost my needle. I wanna do my cut on the inside of the sock. So again, I'm gonna kind of weave that trailing bit of yarn into the sock, and then I'm just going to trim it close. And believe it or not, you don't need a knot. So there it is. That's the new darn. You can compare it to the hole in the beginning. And these socks will now last quite a bit longer. I will go, I promise someday, go back and reinforce this other area that needs it before I get a big hole there. It is always easier to reinforce than it is to mend a big hole. And that's it.